Hello, and thank you again for joining us here at Autistic Radio, sponsored by coldpack.co.uk. It's Cold Pack that keeps the lights on. So if you need a cold pack for home use, please use the website. And if you need to order for your practice as an osteopath, a chiropractor or a physiotherapist, then please consider getting the best cold pack for your patients from coldpack.co.uk. Harry, it's time for the show. What have you got for us?
Hello everyone, this is Harry's Facebook for Sunday the 2nd of August 2026, and this is where we go through the posts in the autisticradio.org page. And as always, we start with a poem, and the poem, written by myself, is called Paint a Rainbow. My creativity makes me want to paint a rainbow. My creativity makes me want to write a story. My creativity makes me want to sing a song. My creativity makes me want to illustrate a poem. And all my creativity wants to give love. What's your thoughts?
Thank you, Harry. I think that's simple, autistic, and rather beautiful, because in that simplicity, it sends out a real message about us, doesn't it?
I just think this is great and that it would be perfect um, to have like a lot of children of any kind, any neurodivergence or non neurodivergence, have this poem. It seems like it even could be a children's book. I know I say that a lot, but I think this is terrific.
Thank you for your comments, much appreciated. What the poem is about is, and it relates to childhood as well, is I feel like sometimes, or most of the time actually, that I'm holding myself back from doing things. You know, from writing, doing something creative. And this poem is a sort of a kind of burst of frustration in one way, but letting it go in terms of a therapeutic way of moving forward and just putting it down in words. Because what I've noticed, my usual path in the past of dealing with things, not just dealing with things, but being creative about an experience. You know, like I used to do walking groups years ago, and I used to love writing poetry about the kind of the scenery, the walk, or where I was at the time. And there was other times years ago where I'm writing about frustration. And even quite recently, I did a poem about a picture that my dad gave me that I've got on my wall, called Room with a View, because it's a view of Ben Lomond taken from a picture and turned into a canvas sort of picture. And sometimes I feel, maybe I should try a bit of painting, sing a song, write a song, do something creative, jam a little, I suppose. I don't know an instrument or anything like that, but I don't know, just being more freer with myself. Because I feel like a lot of masking, which I've actually practiced myself to do, or conditioned myself to do, sometimes it's held me back a little. And from other people's experiences that I've heard from people sharing it on Facebook, is a lot of people do that. And if you're a child, you're actually, you're basically conditioned to do that anyway. Because if you're too creative, too this, too that, it's like, no, you're not concentrating on your work. You need to be educated here. They don't say it like that, but basically that's what they mean, is like, don't be too creative, don't be too, you know, thinking and be, you know what I mean? Just that, be creative. If they say that sort of thing is in the way. So basically, what the poem's about is just sharing all that sort of experience, because I know that others feel the same way and will connect to it.
I forgot to say that I also like it because I feel like it's a list poem, or at least almost, yeah, I guess it is a list poem. But sometimes that's a good warm up to more creativity.
I think that's why they call it practice. Um, GR says in the text, I should always have a pen and paper handy. The words form the sentences and poems in my head, and I usually just let them fade away. I have a dictaphone on my phone for those moments when I'm caught without pen and paper.
Twin Peaks, if that was the case, if I had that.
What did you say?
Twin Peaks, if I had something to talk into, to dictate on.
I have tiny little notebooks, a little bit smaller than passports, and I just put them in pockets and bags and beside my bed for that purpose.
So we're talking about the moment seizing you, because when I was reading through Harry's poem, I wrote in the text wanting. It seemed to be a poem about wanting as much as it was about creativity. And that's a reflection I'm making because that's how I feel at times. Um, the shoulds in life, or I want to, but I don't. Why don't I? And there's some things that you just can't stop doing because they just come to you. It's like you'll see an instrument somewhere or meet one somewhere in your travels, and you'll end up owning one, and you don't have to play it or anything. You're just fascinated by it, and it's there for you if you need it. So's a pen and paper, so's paper, but I think we often compare ourselves to end product and how to achieve that and get frustrated, as Harry says.
JR's comment, it spurred back a memory, about should always have a pen and paper handy, because I do recall being in these walking groups, which were led by Autistic Charity at the time. So, and I do remember asking someone at one time, because this is when I realised that I would need to bring a pen and paper with me. Um, and I asked them for a pen, a bit of paper, so I could write it down in that moment, or I'd lose it. And I think I do that a lot, and I think a lot of people do. And this poem itself is that I was actually sitting, you know, not too bored, but writing it down. But it was one of those middle of the night ones. And I thought, I need to write this down. So I didn't write it down. I basically typed it on a word processor, a Word document. I basically put it down a Word document on my laptop, which is a lot easier, I suppose, if you're on the laptop all the time anyway. And I thought, I look forward to sharing that. And it wasn't till the last moment today that I decided to share it. I was actually going to keep it for a while. But I just wanted to share it just to sort of. A lot of the poetry that I was kind of saying to maybe share today was maybe a bit more deeper and a bit more, like say, negative, but a bit gloomy. So it's just something to be a bit more inspiring.
There's two things I'm curious about, Harry. You begin it with the title Paint a Rainbow, and the second line is, you want to paint a rainbow. So I'm imagining you through the middle of the night, somehow seeing a rainbow, having this desire for a rainbow. Maybe you were influenced by something. And then in the end, you say your creativity wants to give love. So you see it as a loving action. Often I think about any form of expression as relationship. You want to relate or share, which in a sense is love. So I'm just curious about your use of these terms.
Rainbow, the word rainbow comes up quite a lot in my life in a way. I listen to a few songs from the band called Rainbow. The rainbow colours or symbols is used for so many different things like pride, artistic pride as well. And I've even got a song, the theme song from the children's programme Rainbow as well. Uh, and it's just what it relates to is sometimes I feel like I just want to paint a picture. And the most one that the one that seems the most simple but creative to do is just to sort of do a sort of kind of rainbow type of kind of picture, just paint the rainbow all these different colours and blend them together because it just seems like an outpouring of emotion of different thoughts, different feelings all at the one time, and that just it's some of the greatest colours, some of the sort of not so great colours. Even thinking about it's a strange sensation, but that's basically what it is. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, I want to paint a rainbow, but I'm also a writer of poetry, so I wanted to add that in. I used to like writing stories as a young boy, you know, usually as a hero of some sort of book. Not a hero saving someone, but just a hero of, helping people sort of thing. And getting back at the bullies and stuff. It's quite funny thinking about that, but it's not that unreasonable if you think about it. And I'm sure I'm not the only person to do it. And I used to write poetry, like in rhyme, where it was like song lyrics. So sometimes I used to actually make up these sort of songs in my head, and basically what I did is I just turned them into poems sometimes. So it's that's why it's all came together the way it was. And what I like about the poem is at the time it was like a big rush of words, just tighten them down. And I don't think that's that I kind of went back on it saying I need to change that word. There's some poetry that I do, some just pour out, and some might not make complete sense, and I just leave it because of the poetic license, I suppose, and because I feel it's genuine. Although sometimes I wouldn't share some of those poems because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, which is a bit contradiction. But that's what basically it's about.
I'm thinking about the difference between creation and procreation, if there is any at all, because A friend I had who was a published novelist, he's written about 7 books. He said to me that every time he planned a book, which could take about 2 years, he had a child. Now, I'm not saying he had 7 children. Something happened to stop it at 4, I think. But it always amused me when he brought that up.
I thought of two things. One, if your phone has one of those note apps on it, you could just take down the notes in nature that you want to, or sometimes I type them into a calendar, like appointment for the next day. I type my idea in it, and then it will come up at a certain time the next day, and then I can work on it more. Um, but I thought of another thing. Your poem today was like a list poem in a way. What if you took the snippets, the ideas you're not sure are good, and made them into a list poem? Because in a way, it provides structure for the incomplete ideas that you thought were brilliant. And if you put them in a list poem, it gives them like a perfectionistic structure, because they might mean a lot to other people.
A big part of creativity that bothers me is like where to actually share it.
Yes, I totally agree there. And I think that's what my issue was at one time as well. Although I did say it myself, you don't need to share it, you can just, you know, keep it to yourself. But I like to share things. And when I used to write poetry years ago, I used to share it in these sort of events I used to have in local libraries. It was like basically doing a gig. You know, you're sitting, you're listening to other people doing poetry, and you're sitting, and I'm sitting all nervous and want to get it over and done with. But once you stand up and actually kind of do it in the flow, it just felt so good doing it. And then afterwards, it felt great sitting after doing it, getting the applause. Um, although I don't think it'd be any kind of mocking at those sort of events anyway, not openly. So I do recall doing that, and that was through the creative writing groups I used to go to, and that's why I was aware of this, these things in certain libraries. Although I wasn't comfortable in doing them after it for a while, but I did it for a good couple of years. But the thing about social media, and well, not just social media. Of course, I've done it on the Facebook page for Autistic Radio, but doing it here, and if there was any criticism, there wouldn't be criticism as such. It just be comments. I don't think anybody would criticise like that, but honest enough. But that was a thing in the past, is who to share it to and where it was safe to share it to. Well, I would say here, and the page is certainly one of them, or two of them.
I have to watch what I say sometimes because I tend to want to deconstruct stuff, break it down and ask, like, well, what do you mean by this and what do you mean by that? And you know what I mean? And it's a passion killer, really. So I restrain that desire in me to understand things in that way. But I also accept it's a truly autistic way of wanting to understand things. It's like, why? How? Where? When? All those prefixes come to mind when I see anything. What? Why? Where? When? But it can disturb people, and so you restrain it. And we restrain a lot of things related to creativity at times that we think we're just non-creative, which is unfortunate because it opens up doors for you being creative. Just doing something, doesn't matter what it is, it changes things.
The next post is from Everything Autism. It's a medical and health page. We provide neuroaffirming, highly specialist and timely autism and ADHD diagnostic assessments. We provide screening assessments as well as full multidisciplinary in-depth assessments. We also provide neuroaffirming training to schools and workplaces, and it's based in the UK. And it's about autism or autistic disorder or difference. The words we use matter. For many years, being autistic and being ADHD have been viewed through a medical lens as disorders, deficits, or problems that need to be treated or fixed. A neuroaffirming approach recognises something different. It understands that being autistic or ADHD is a neurotype, a natural variation in how someone's brain develops and experiences the world. This doesn't mean ignoring challenges. Challenges are very real, but it also means recognising the many strengths that come with being neurodivergent and understanding that differences are not deficits. At Everything Autism, being neuroaffirming isn't just something we say, it's at the heart of everything we do. Assessments should not focus on what's wrong. We recognise neurodivergent identity, celebrate strengths alongside explaining challenges, and make meaningful recommendations for support and accommodations that help people feel understood, validated, and able to thrive. Everyone deserves an assessment that helps them understand themselves better, not one that leaves them feeling broken. What's people's thoughts?
This is very interesting to me because Everything Autism is putting itself out there as an organisation that is run by autistic people, that knows autism from the inside. And that's a lovely, lovely thing. I would say that if I wanted to be diagnosed, I would probably look for somebody who understood autism from the inside and look for their services. But here's the problem. We don't have to be diagnosed. Being autistic is not a medical diagnosis. Being autistic is a way of being. You were born like it. And for most people in most societies, the diagnosis is not something that will necessarily lead to a helpful service. So, at the same time as being very happy and clear that actually autistic professionals are very important for us, we have to say to people, you don't need a diagnosis in most circumstances. And most people I know have chosen not to get diagnosed. They've chosen not to get diagnosed because their employers are not going to make the necessary adjustments. They've chosen not to be diagnosed because they don't want it on their medical records in case in the future we are people who are picked out. A lot of people are very afraid in this modern world, with the AI, with the way politics is going, to be singled out as autistic. And I think that's a rational thought. So if diagnosis is going to lead to something good for you, great. But consider not being diagnosed and just continuing being autistic and finding out more about your autism yourself. Because in my experience here where I live, diagnosing yourself as autistic and then being diagnosed as autistic doesn't lead to anything particularly special for you. We here, and most places that are valuable, recognise self-identification.
I was thinking something else when you were reading it. I was thinking, oh, this would be interesting for an adult who was diagnosed as a child, and like taking into account the word diagnosis. I was thinking, let's say more of an interaction, um, based on the idea of like understanding the strengths better and understanding um, yourself better. So that automatically makes me agree with Jules about the word diagnosis. But if there was an exercise called something else, not diagnosis, that say somebody who's known all their life that they had ADHD or some other neurodivergent thing, but then coming to it as an adult with a life experience and just experiencing some kind of conversation based that's new and modern and might help them feel uh, like they can understand it, because when they were a child they were just the subject of a thing that schools and parents and everybody else read and probably didn't understand, but it could be a positive experience.
I don't like the term ASD, never had, never have, because I don't consider myself disorderly. I'm happy with ASC because I have a condition, and there's a local school specifically for children with autism, and outside there's a big banner up and it says children with ASC, and that's the way I prefer it.
I'm curious about. Sorry, I'm curious about a school specifically for autistic children.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't go there. Um, it's in Totton. It's a little small. God, the building must be about 100. It was obviously a small school at one time, and they've taken it over. I usually go past there about 9 o'clock ish, and the road is just literally clogged up with taxis, and people come out of the school with high vis on and meet the children from the taxi and take them inside. Inside there, I mean, it could be like Smersh HQ for all I know, but they escort them into the school, and then whatever their education is. I mean, I'm not going to go knocking on the door and ask, but they obviously get a level of education there.
I was just thinking the other day that both of my kids ended up going to uh, innovative schools. And then my daughter, in addition to innovative, also went to alternative schools. And they're in the school board, but they're separate. And it occurred to me, maybe a lot of the kids there were neurodivergent because they were incredibly creative. The innovative one was thought up by a woman who had been a physics professor uh, who really probably was sort of neurodivergent, but the principles were amazing. And that just occurred to me. Maybe they were self-selecting something, or their parents were. But I'll bet you if any kind of statistics were done, and why would we want them to be anyway, but there might have been a higher proportion, and it was a great experience.
I'm asking because I'm in a reading group with an autistic group, and we're reading this book called A Kind of Spark by Elle McNichol. And in it, it's that old debate about someone who wants to stay in the regular school, but the teacher's trying to get her somewhere else for her own sake. A bullying teacher, as it were, according to the story. So it's just been on my mind, this difference, because sometimes I see kids arriving back home here in taxis who, I don't want to assume anything, but you know, they're being taken in taxis daily backwards and forwards to somewhere where they get schooling, quite young. So I'm just curious as an adult as to the differences that can be made in someone's education and schooling.
Coming back to these terms, for me, my autism is not a dysfunction. It's not something that needs diagnosis. It's not medical. It's not a condition. And it's definitely not a disorder. It's a difference. And the main difference is not about whether I'm disabled in my brain, limited in my intelligence. So it really is about society and social differences. So there's a large group of us where we're autistic, but the thing that needs to be said about us is that we are different socially, and we work differently with a different set of parameters socially. So I would put forward that ASD is autistic social difference, not a diagnosis, not a disorder, and not a condition.
I think that's a better definition for ASC than spectrum condition. I think it's brilliant. Autism social difference. That's great.
Yeah, agreed. And would you say it could be used for any different neurodivergent thing, like cognitive processing disorder or ADHD or anything? Because those people seem to sometimes be treated, you know, the way we can be.
I don't know, Teresa. I know that we need terms for specific things, and medics are going to need the word disorder. They're going to need these things. But it's the medical words being used in social contexts that are the problem for me. So I think we have to have a social way of talking about autism that includes us. And saying it's a social difference to me might mean that somebody can have a autistic social difference. I would describe it as that. And then a medic might talk about me in other terms and say I have one of those labels that you had, and that's perfectly fine. It's just whether we are constantly being ground down by these negative terms and not respected as equal.
Well, I'm going to say then it would work for the central auditory processing disorder because that one, I don't know how rare or common it is, but has nothing to do with hearing at all. And yet, um, you know, people do treat people with that in incredibly unhelpful ways, like talking to them as though they're hard of hearing. They're not hard of hearing. But it is better to explain it in terms of social difference. So they have trouble filtering out all the conversations in a room. You know, the way if you're at a dinner party well, dinner party is harder because you're at one table. But let's say a cocktail party where you're all standing around all different little groupings of people. That person cannot just focus on the one or two people they're talking to. They hear everything as though, you know how they always say, when we're in that situation or people without this thing, that we hear really what the person is saying in sort of a din, unless somebody says our name or our birth date or something, and that will like snap us out, like, ooh, somebody said my name. But I think you know where I'm going with this. But to me, that's more of a social difference, you know.
Well, I don't quite agree because I think it is the result is a social difference, and that's what we need to be dealing with in society. But the medic would say, well, actually, the reason there's a social difference there is something that I need to concentrate on, and then there's this disorder, there's this auditory processing disorder, and we need to explain it to the person to say, actually, their brain is wired differently in this way, and we call it a disorder because it's different from the average. But that doesn't mean you are a disordered person, you're a social difference. So inside the consultant room, I think those terms are useful and helpful and explain things to us. But outside the consulting room, the effects of those labels, the effects of those diagnoses are about our difference. So there's a social framing and there's a medical framing. We just need to keep them apart, in my feeling.
I really love that.
The next post is from Jordan's Autistic Journey, a personal blog by a parent. My son is 4 years old and has autism. This is our journey together. And they shared the following quote: August the 1st marks a fresh beginning. I'm choosing hope over fear, peace over anxiety, gratitude over complaints, and faith over doubt. What's your thoughts?
It's like a prayer, isn't it? I've got this feeling you could be doing this every day. Just to, you know, have an account with yourself about what's going on.
Is there anything special about August 1st? Like, I feel this way at the beginning of September when school goes back. Lots of people feel this way on January 1st. If there's nothing different about August 1st, it seems like a great idea that you could do this any time. Just like Ray said, you could do it every day. Is there something special about August 1st?
Well, we're always looking for significance, and if someone mentions a date, then we'll look for significance, but maybe it's just the date they posted, or it's the beginning of a month, or, you know, it could be just after the full moon. who knows what significance we could attach to it. But it's an opinion.
Yeah, as I said before, August the 1st is the anniversary of letting my dog go, so it wasn't a great day for me, to be honest. So August the 2nd is definitely better.
What I'm taking from it, and the reason I shared it, is it's a milestone created by the person who created the post. Like, they've had a hard time up to this point, or they've had a hard month during July. So it's like, right, it's like a sort of self-therapy, self-reassurance, sort of basically moving on from something that's been difficult. Or maybe someone deciding just to mark this as a new chapter in their life with their child or themselves. Because I know I've done this myself. I generally do it though, the sort of common thing in terms of the calendar year. But I know people that go day by day, week by week, month by month, sometimes season by season, because some seasons can be quite difficult in terms of the winter time in comparison to when the spring comes round, and there's this sort of, it kind of lifts so many people up. But then again, winter or autumn is times where people feel, oh, now I can now relax a little because summertime was a bit hectic. It just depends what the experience is and what they mean. What I found interesting is I like how people pick out these sort of things to help themselves move forward. A beacon of hope.
I like your use of the word milestone, Harry. I mean, that's one of these words we take for granted so much. I was reading today about what's called dead metaphors. I suppose, I don't think milestone is one. Milestone still seems attached to its original meaning. Or landmark even, these geographical kind of marking terms for distance and movement in the landscape. It's I love that word, milestone. As opposed to millstone.
There used to be, I can't remember, it was a Microsoft planning tool, and you set milestones in a project, MS Project, there you go, and you set milestones up and it came up like it was a glorified spreadsheet, to be honest.
The next post is from A Cup Full of Spoons. Health and wellness website and writer. I share informative and relatable content and my own lived experience with chronic illness and disability, neurodivergence and mental health. I also share special interest content in my poetry and art. From an AUDHD spoonie. My pronouns are she and her. And shared the following. It's been a while since I drew a fairy, so this morning I decided to do one. Drawn by me on the Procreate Pocket app for iPhone. A digital drawing of a fairy with her arms outstretched. She has long, wavy dark red hair and freckles. Her wings are turquoise with purple outline. She wears a bright orange top with puffy sleeves and harlequin print pants in purple, green, teal and yellow. She has green pointed shoes and the image is on a black background. What's your thoughts?
Are you tempted to get that app, Harry? Because I think one of the first conversations we ever had was about you losing a phone.
First, I was tempted to check this app out, but the thing that really caught my attention was the way it was described in words.
I mean, this is the sort of thing I was talking about earlier. And I think this is one of the kind of posts that inspired me to do the poem. You know, when people have got things, you know, they want to share, a lot of it is in words. And of course, I did it in words this way because it's audio. But someone creating a picture of a fairy, a character, a vision, something nice, something that's just seeing this world that's kind of, if it's feeling down and you feel ever so negative and bad, it's like you can create this lovely thing. You can give it a name, you know, all sorts of things. You can create so much around it. And there's so much creativity, you know, around the artistic world. And it's just great when people share things like this, and this is why it's been shared. The audio doesn't do it justice, but people can see it on the Facebook page. You know, it's just wonderful. And I just love the colours, the nice bright colours. Like a rainbow, so to speak, in some ways. But also sharing how it was done, so that others can maybe do it, you know, themselves if they wanted to use that particular app. But yeah, just love stuff like this.
I do like the balance of colours, you know, the blue and the purple and the green. The orange then appears, and I'm okay with that. And that red is just nice and dark. It's making me think about the wood sprites out the back here, because one of my neighbours, man, cut down 2 trees recently, a hawthorn and another one, and I was a wee bit sad, and I heard a distressed bird for about a day or two afterwards. But you know, I'm probably reading too much into it all. But I remember an old friend when I stayed in another part of town who used to go in, you know, try and calm down the wood sprites who were upset about their trees, you know. Read into that what you want. But I did feel I had to sort of go out and kind of compensate in some way for what I was feeling about all that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I do like everything to do with this. Probably I'm a bit influenced by the nickname my parents gave me when I was a baby, which is still my nickname, which is Tinkerbell, although adults just say Tink.
Yeah, it is lovely, Teresa. Um, that does happen to many people, end up with nicknames such as this. I mean, it's better having a nickname that's affectionate rather than one that's insulting. You know, I think mine was Mad Harry or something like that.
Well, my sister's was affectionate for a baby. It was Tubsy because she was a cute, you know, baby with rolls. However, I think it's scarring in the end.
The next post is from Life on the Spectrum. Digital Curator, your daily dose of autism positivity, educating through acceptance. And what it's shared is the following. It's about Disney giving a beloved character an autism diagnosis, then cast an autistic child to voice him, and it's 10 years old, first role. B.B. Proud has been part of the Proud family since the original series. He isn't a new character brought in for a special episode. He's the baby of the house and one of the twins. Someone viewers have known for years. Now he has an autism diagnosis. The creators said they specifically didn't want to bring in an autistic guest character who shows up, teaches everyone a lesson, and disappears by the credits. BB's family. BB is family. He was always family. The diagnosis is part of his story now, not the whole of it. And they cast an autistic child to voice him. Aidan Dodson is autistic himself, playing an autistic character on Disney, which is still rarer than it should be. Holly Robinson Peete, who has been open for years about
BC, you wouldn't know really about this book for 7-year-olds and above. So in watching the series, I became aware that there's this huge network out there now of child actors, very good child actors who are neurodivergent and autistic and ADHD, and they're getting all these roles, and they're the crew as well. This is being insisted upon, and so you have this awareness, which is making me think back to the times when, black music being represented on TV was such a major thing. Dusty Springfield herself, a representation from a minority group, pushed to have Tamla Motown on British TV in the mid-60s. And then in the 80s, David Bowie complained to MTV in an interview, why do you not have any black acts? And so there was a power in what black music was producing to represent themselves, but eventually they get represented and difference becomes not normal, but, just beautifully different, and everybody's aware of it. So just wee thoughts here on media representation.
What struck me was that the voice of the doctor was highly selected so that that would be just right by a compassionate person.
what I like about it is the post I was uncertain of at first, and then I was reading through it and it made sense at the end and it felt quite warming. But I'm not a person directly affected, so it would affect people in a lot in different ways. But it's good about these representations. They're trying to be more proactive and not throw autism in a way that they used to in terms of this big special thing we'll talk about it then move on. It's like something that's part of the way things are, and that's how children learn. I mean, to be fair, I have never heard of this, but then I wouldn't because I don't watch stuff like that. I don't have children or anything like that. But it's good to know that people are aware of it, and it actually brought the reaction that it has. It can all be a good thing. It was wonderful to share.
Isn't it amazing as an adult to see that in the children's entertainment and world there is all this representation?
It certainly is, because it's showing children there's different ways and different people, but people who are different from you aren't any less than you, and you aren't any less than them. Because I remember kind of growing up, it was like it was very narrow, and as we know, there's people in certain political elements that want to kind of reverse all that back, just as a means of control, I suppose. Hate as well, of course, but a lot of it's to do with control. But it's good that this is still charging on and bulldozing all that hatred and prejudice as much as it can. And what I also like about it is it's in Disney as well. And Disney, of course, is well known. I know Disney myself. Well, I don't know Disney, but you know what I mean. It's like Disney is part of, certainly for me, is part of the one of the things that you kind of grow up with in terms of entertainment. A lot of it that I watched was the kind of feature films, but there was things as time went on as there were actually channels and stuff that my siblings kind of watched and things. So, it's like part of society of growing up, etc. It's good to see that sort of thing, and it's not just Disney. I mean, you just talk about BBC as well, so it could only be a good thing. Well, thanks everyone. That was a great conversation as always, a great discussion, and I look forward to doing the same next week. Also, thanks to all the people that post. Thanks to all the people that have created those posts that we'll share today as well. So this is Harry's Facebook for Sunday the 2nd of August 2026, which is part of the Special Voices conversation, which is live every Sunday, 5:55 to 7 p.m. UK time. So thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.